Today's mindful moment. What if, and this is a big what if, everything you thought you knew about how to really make positive change was, well, wrong?
That's an interesting question. I like where this is going.
I'm talking about that idea that maybe, just maybe, the best way to a better society isn't more government, but actually more freedom for individuals.
Oh, okay. I see. Now we're getting somewhere.
That's the really provocative question at the heart of this book, Free to Choose, by Milton and Rose Friedman.
Oh, yeah, Free to Choose. That's a classic.
And we are going deep on this one, trust me.
I bet. It's a book that really gets you thinking about, well, a lot of things. It challenges a lot of assumptions about, what government should be doing, what its role is in our lives.
Right. The Friedmans, their argument is that free markets, giving people more choices, that's actually more effective at fixing problems. And not just fixing problems, but making everyone more prosperous and, free.
Yeah, they make a really compelling case. And they start by breaking down some big kind of heady concepts like, what is the invisible hand?
Oh, the invisible hand. Now, I remember that from Econ 101.
Right. It's that term that Adam Smith came up with way back in the 18th century. And it's become this powerful metaphor for how free markets actually work.
I'm with you so far.
Basically, the idea is that when you and me, when everyone can just go after what they want in a free market, it ends up benefiting everyone, even if no one's trying to do that.
Wait, so I'm trying to make money, you're trying to get the best deal, and somehow everyone wins.
That's the beauty of it. And the Friedmans, they use this really clever example to explain it. The example of, get this, a pencil.
A pencil. What's so special about a pencil?
Think about it. Nobody, literally no single person on the planet knows how to make a pencil from scratch.
Wow, when you put it that way.
All the parts, the wood, the graphite, the eraser, the little metal thing, they all come from different places, involve all these different people, all these different processes.
So it's like this massive global collaboration.
Right. And no one's calling the shots. There's no pencil czar telling people what to do. It just happens.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is. And the magic ingredient, it's us pursuing our self-interest within that whole system of prices and supply and demand.
So businesses want to make pencils as cheap as possible to make more money, and we want the best pencil for the cheapest price.
Exactly. And that push and pull, that competition is what makes the whole thing work. Makes things cheaper, better quality for everyone.
I never thought about it like that, but it makes sense.
It's a great example of how letting people make their own decisions within a free market can lead to, amazing results. Better results than if some government agency was trying to plan it all out.
I feel like I'm starting to see their point.
Right. And to really drive this point home, they look at what happened in places where you had free markets and more controlled economies, like side by side. They talk about East Germany and West Germany before the Berlin Wall came down.
Oh, yeah, that's a stark contrast.
Total. In the East, central planning, the government controlling everything, and it was a mess. Shortages, no innovation, and people weren't doing well. But in the West, things were booming. More freedom, more prosperity, night and day.
Wow, it's almost like a real-world experiment testing out these ideas.
It really was, and it shows how important that free flow of information is. All those signals we get from prices, from supply and demand, that's information that helps guide all those individual decisions.
Information that a central planner just doesn't have.
Right. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The Friedmans, they say that this whole invisible hand idea, it applies to way more than just stuff we buy. It works for healthcare, education, even social programs, things we usually think of as government's job.
Really? So, they're saying maybe the government shouldn't be so involved in all that.
That's exactly what they're saying. In fact, they go so far as to say that a lot of times when the government tries to fix these problems, it actually makes things worse, even with good intentions.
So, even when the government's trying to help, it could backfire.
They call it the tyranny of good intentions.
Tyranny of good intentions. That's a pretty powerful phrase.
It is, right. And it gets to the heart of their whole critique of big government.
So let's dig into that. What exactly do they mean by this tyranny of good intentions? What are some examples of, where the government tries to do good, but things go sideways?
Well, one of the most powerful examples they give is public housing in the U.S.
Public housing. That makes sense.
The idea was good, right? Provide affordable, safe housing for low-income families.
Yeah, makes total sense.
But what happened? A lot of times, these projects ended up concentrating poverty. They became dangerous, crime-ridden. They actually made things worse for the people they were supposed to help.
That's pretty bleak.
Yeah.
So they're saying that the government can have these good intentions, but
But the results can be disastrous. And one of the reasons, they argue, is that government programs, they don't have that same feedback loop that you get in a free market.
what do you mean?
Like, if a business is doing a bad job, people start buying their stuff, right? They go out of business or they have to get better. But with government programs, people are often stuck.
I see. They don't really have choice.
And when a government program fails, what happens? Usually, they just throw more money at it, create more bureaucracy.
More red tape, more forms to fill out.
Exactly. And it can just make the problem worse.
So hold on. Are they saying that all government is bad? Like there's no role for government at all?
Not quite. They do say there are certain things that the government is essential for, things like national defense, police, courts, protecting property rights, stuff that's needed for a stable society.
Okay, that makes sense.
But they draw a line. They say when government tries to do too much, when it goes beyond those basic functions, that's when you get into trouble.
I see. So when it tries to control the economy or people's lives too much.
Right. They say that's when you start to see freedom and prosperity shrink and problems get worse instead of better. And one area where this whole battle between government and individual choice gets really heated is education.
Oh, yeah. They do not hold back on their criticism of the public school system.
No, they don't. They basically say it's this big, clunky bureaucracy, more worried about protecting itself than actually educating kids.
They point to all these problems like test scores going down, the gap between rich and poor kids getting bigger, and just like a lack of any real progress or innovation.
Yeah, and they say the core issue is that parents don't really have a choice in where their kids go to school.
Right, you're kind of stuck with whatever school district you're in.
Exactly. And without that competition, they say schools don't have any real incentive to improve. It's like if there's only one grocery store in town, why bother having fresh produce?
I get it. So their solution is like more school choice, right? Things like vouchers or tax credits so parents can send their kids to private schools or charter schools.
Right on. They think that competition would shake things up, force schools to actually listen to parents and get better.
It makes sense in theory, but, this has been super controversial. Right?
Oh, yeah, huge controversy. Teachers' unions hate it, and a lot of people think education is like a basic right, that it shouldn't be subject to the free market.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is. But the Friedmans, they say, look, there are real concerns like making sure all kids have access to good education, no matter their background.
That's a good point.
But they think those problems can be solved with, smart policies. And for them, the potential benefits of school choice, they outweigh the risks.
So they see the free market as a solution, not just for like buying and selling stuff, but for these bigger social issues too, right? Like healthcare or the environment.
Absolutely. They think markets are this powerful tool that can often do a better job than the government at fixing these complex problems.
I mean, healthcare is a good example. They're pretty critical of the way things are set up in the U.S., aren't they?
Yeah, they say that government intervention, like Medicare and Medicaid, has actually made healthcare more expensive and less effective.
It's kind of counterintuitive, right?
It is. But their point is that these programs, they distort the market. They don't let prices work properly.
I see. So patients and doctors, they're not really seeing the true cost of healthcare.
Right. And because of that, costs go up and quality can suffer. They think if you had a more market-driven system where people were spending their own money and providers had to compete, things would be better.
So lower prices, better care.
That's the idea. It's a big shift from how we usually think about healthcare, but it fits their whole philosophy of empowering individuals and shrinking the government.
So they apply this same logic to other things too, right? Like environmental protection.
Yep. They think pollution, for example, can often be addressed better through market solutions like pollution taxes or letting companies trade emissions permits.
Instead of just having the government set strict rules.
Right. They say these market-based approaches, they encourage companies to find the cheapest and most efficient ways to reduce pollution.
Makes sense.
It's all about incentives. The Friedmans believe that markets are really good at aligning what's good for individuals with what's good for society as a whole.
But they're not saying that markets are perfect, are they? I mean, there are times when markets don't work well, right?
Okay.
Like when it comes to things like clean air or public parks, things that benefit everyone.
Yeah, good point. They acknowledge that markets aren't a magic bullet. They can fail sometimes, and there are times when you need government to step in.
Okay, so it's not like a black and white thing.
Right. They're not saying get rid of all government. It's more about, let's start with the assumption that markets can do the job and only use government when it's really necessary.
So they're not anti-government. It's more like,
They're pro-freedom. They
yeah,
think individuals should be free to make their own choices, even if they make mistakes sometimes.
it's a pretty bold vision.
It is. But it's all based on this idea that people are generally the best judges of their own interests and that freedom is essential, not just for a strong economy, but for people to really thrive.
They see government as more of a referee, right? Setting the rules, making sure everyone plays fair.
Exactly. But when government tries to do too much, it can stifle creativity, make people dependent, and actually undermine that freedom that's so important.
But it's a pretty different way of looking at things.
It is. But even if you don't agree with everything they say, it definitely makes you think.
One thing that people often say about the Friedmans is that they focus too much on, like, economic efficiency and not enough on fairness.
Right.
Like, what about social justice?
That's a fair point, and it's something we should definitely dig into. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore how the Friedmans respond to those criticisms and how their ideas could be used to create a society that's not just richer, but also more just and equitable.
So we've been digging into the Friedmans' arguments, for free markets, less government. But one thing I keep coming back to is, what about those who say this whole approach is just going to, like, favor the rich? Doesn't it kind of ignore issues of fairness, social justice, all that?
Yeah, it's a common criticism. Some folks say the Friedmans are so focused on the economy, on efficiency, that they don't care enough about making sure everyone gets a fair shake.
Right, exactly. So how do they square that circle? How do they deal with that?
Well, they actually address it pretty directly. They say the best way to really help people who are struggling, it's not through handouts, not more welfare.
Okay, then what?
It's about creating an environment where anyone can climb that ladder,
Yeah.
where success comes from, hard work, taking initiative.
So it's more about opportunity, not just handing everyone the same outcome.
Exactly. They think a free market, it rewards hard work, lets people be entrepreneurial. That's the real way to get people out of poverty. They look at like how the middle class grew in the past, how so many people saw their lives improve. They say that was because of economic growth and that came from free markets.
But they're not saying that, like, if someone's down on their luck, tough luck.
No, they're not heartless. They get that some folks need help, maybe because of disability or just bad luck. But they think private charity, people helping each other, that's actually more effective, more compassionate than big government programs.
Interesting. So where does the government fit in then? They do talk about a safety net, right?
They do. They say there should be a basic safety net for people who truly need it. But it has to be designed carefully.
Carefully how?
So it doesn't discourage work. They worry about those welfare traps where people get stuck, It should be a hand up, not just a handout forever.
I see. Help them get back on their feet, not create dependency.
Right. And they also make this point, which is kind of thought-provoking, that a lot of the problems the government tries to solve with these programs, they wouldn't even exist if the economy was freer.
Wait, really? Explain that.
So they point to all these regulations, these rules that the government puts in place, and they say those rules can actually make it harder for people to get ahead.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, like occupational licensing. It makes it harder to start certain businesses, or zoning laws. They can make housing more expensive. And even minimum wage, they say, it can price some people out of jobs.
So they're saying sometimes the government is actually causing the problems it's trying to fix.
That's their argument. And they think that if you remove those roadblocks, get rid of all that red tape, the economy would be more dynamic, more inclusive.
So there's this underlying faith in, like, the power of the free market to sort things out.
There is. It's a pretty bold vision, maybe even radical to some, but it's also kind of optimistic, don't you think?
I can see that. It's like, set people free, let them make their own choices, and good things will happen.
Exactly. They see this world where individual freedom and responsibility are at the heart of everything, where the market creates prosperity for everyone, not just a few. And the government, it's there, but it's limited. Its main job is to protect our rights, make sure the rules are fair.
Well, this deep dive into free to choose has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too. The Friedmans, they challenge us to look at the world differently, even if we don't always agree with them.
And they make us question some assumptions that maybe we didn't even realize we had.
It's not just about specific policies. It's like a whole new way of thinking about the role of government, the power of individual choice.
If you're intrigued by all this, we really encourage you to check out Free to Choose for yourself. We'll have a link in the show notes.
And let us know what you think. Did any of this resonate with you? Did it challenge your views? Share your thoughts in the comments.
And don't forget to subscribe to the Deep Dive and tell your friends about the show.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those minds engaged.